Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I am so thrilled and so grateful to have Brett Pyle with us today. Prior to earning his certified speaking professional credential from the National Speakers Association in 2020, Brett's 30-year global business career with companies such as Anderson Consulting, oil giants Amoco and BP, and Vistage Worldwide had him living, leading, and learning in over 75 countries on 6 continents. Along the journey, he discovered that we're all created for a purpose and gifted with unique skills, ideas, and passions that the world desperately needs. And he's on a mission to help individuals and organizations connect with their extraordinary why. And I'm so grateful to you, Brett, for being here, because I think that many people question their own extraordinary why. And I think that this conversation is a very important one to have for anyone at any stage in their life. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Vera. Hard to even imagine I'm on this podcast, given the all-star lineup that you have organized over all the years. I mean, I've had the joy of listening to dozens of them, and you've got all of my heroes. You've got the Harvey Goldbergs and the Boazes and the Arenas and the Mickey Williams and Rick Carson. Oh my gosh, and Taming Your Gremlin. I mean, it's a who's who of the great people. And am I actually the one that's following Marshall Goldsmith? Woo! Okay,
Yeah.
well, suffice it to say, I'm honored to be with you. Wow, what a job you've done with this podcast.
Thank you, Brett. And you're absolutely an all-star. And I think that what's really special for everybody listening to really get is that each and every one of us, everybody listening, is absolutely an all-star. And their all-starness really has nothing to do with how much they've achieved. And it has more to do with who they are being and who they choose to be and why they're doing it. And so
Oh,
thank you.
that's it. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Yeah. Just bring your unique identity into whatever you are, and then you're going to be all you were meant to be while you're there.
That's right. So let's get right into that concept of unique identity. So, I mentioned in the introduction that you truly believe that we are gifted with uniqueness. So, what do you mean by that?
Hmm. Well, there are lots of places you can get your identity from, I think. You can get it from yourself and listen to those voices up in your head saying this is who you are and who you're not. And some of those voices are really accurate, and others maybe not so much so. You can get it from other people and what other people are saying who you are and who you're not. And some of those voices are very encouraging to us, and they build us up, and they might be leading us closer to what our true identity is. And yet it's a crowded neighborhood up here, and some of those voices may not be all that useful, right? You have people that have, instead of speaking blessing over you, they've spoken curses over you. And if we choose to believe those voices, it's not helping us. And it's certainly not helping the world. So those two sources are useful, but I just don't think they're all that reliable. I think if you really want to get an essence of who you are and who you're created to be, which then leads into what your purpose is going to be, I think you have to consult the one that created you for that purpose. And so we got to cultivate a relationship with our creator in order that we can live the life that we really were destined to live. That I like to think of it, Vera, as a promise that was made to the world when you were breathed into it. The creator literally saying, I have this thing, this essence of what I want Vera to do while she's here. And I promise to the world that's why I'm putting her here. And if we don't slow down enough and cultivate enough of a space within our way of being on a day-to-day basis, we could miss it. We could be wildly successful, achieve amazing things, and actually have missed the very reason and the purposes for which we were created. So that's the approach I come after this thing called identity and purpose, is that it's bigger than us. And if it is, then we can't find it by just looking within. We have to look within, but we also have to look within with a reliable guidance system. And that's one that I think gets cultivated over time, and it has to prove itself to us or how will we know if it's trustworthy, right? So there's a whole lot going on there for me as I consider this thing called identity, purpose, extraordinary why.
Thank you, Brett. And I believe that this going inward is the key. And when we hear the word creator, of course, many different belief systems for people listening. And I think what's important is to connect with whatever it is that's the deeper part of ourselves, our soul, that which is bigger than the things that we do or the hats that we wear. Sometimes we connect with it when we're in nature, or when we experience love, right? Receiving love, giving love, compassion. And it's the place where we're feeling more whole. And from that place, I do believe that we have a direct contact to something that is bigger than us. The Heart Math Institute calls that non-local intuition. And we do have evidence showing that our heart is connected to something that is beyond time and space. And with that comes guidance. And that heart's intuitive guidance can absolutely lead us toward what is most important. And so I know that you wrote an extraordinary book called Extraordinary Why. And would you be willing to kind of share with us a little bit? How do we find what that why is? Like, how do we know what's our purpose?
Well, great question, and I will get to it. Before I go there, though, maybe it'd be useful to even talk about how in the world I came about that topic and why it was of interest to me.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it was funny listening to you read the bio of all the companies and jobs I work with. It sounds like it's a bio that says, "Here's a guy who can't hold a job." And there were other things that got left out along the way, and all of them contributed to really this larger journey that I have been on. I for about 15 years ago, I started a Vistage practice, and I know many of your guests have been former Vistage chairs and or speakers. Peer advisory board bring non-competing CEOs into an advisory board to help one another. And after having worked with them for 3 or 4 years, some of my CEOs were saying, Brett, you're good at this chairing thing, and maybe there's a speech in you. Maybe you ought to be a speaker too. And honestly, my very first thought when they would say that to me is, I don't even know what you're talking about. I really don't sense I have anything, to say. And some of them said, yeah, you do. Just tell other people the kind of stuff you tell us when you're coaching us. And as I reflected on that, I'm like, well, maybe I'm getting this coaching thing all wrong. I'm talking way too much. And they're saying, go speak somewhere so we can get a word in edgewise, right? So anyway, I reflected on all that and I said, you know what? I do think that there is a talk I could have that might be useful for audiences of CEOs that are going to be wildly successful and they're achieving great things, and it could be a goal setting program, but maybe it's goal setting from a longer term perspective. From the reality of, hey, you're CEOs, you're business owners, you're entrepreneurs, you're going to be successful. You're also going to be dead really soon. And in the end, will anything that you have done while you're here have mattered, or might you have wasted the gift you've been given called life? And worse than maybe wasting it and being irrelevant, might you have actually become complicit in evil and actually have made the world worse through being in it, even if you didn't intend to do so, if that was the ultimate outcome of your life? I mean, how do you live with that, and how do you die with that? So how about we take a day away from life and business to reflect on life and business, to ask some of these bigger questions like, who am I and why am I here, and what must I do before I leave the planet, or I will have failed to fulfill my purpose. So that was the impetus of doing the talk. I gave it one time to my group. They were very generous and they scored me well, which got me onto the circuit. And then the talk, just as you know, it can sit out there. Brett has a talk and it's on finding your purpose. And it did sit there for about 2 years. Nobody bit, right? So I'm like, that's fine. Maybe I'm not supposed to do it. And then about 2 years after it was out there, I had a chair or two find it and say, hey, this looks interesting. Will you deliver it for my group? And one of those people at the end of it This guy was a guy by the name of Lou Allegra, and I always believe in honoring those who have helped you. And Lou was one of the first ones who, at the end of my talk, said, "Hey, Brett, how much speaking do you want to do?" And I said, I haven't given it much thought. And he said, "Well, I think you could be really good at it. Get yourself a website and get ready." And Lou was really kind. He posted a review of my talk onto a network that other chairs looked at, and I was like, "Wow, that's interesting." The next week, I was delivering a course. There's an organization called Blackaby Ministries International that I work with, and helped them develop a coaching practice called spiritual leadership coaching. And the idea of the practice is don't coach. Coaching's powerful. You know it. You're a coach, right? Where are you today? Where do you want to be in the future? And through a series of structured conversations and accountability, maybe we can get you there faster. And what we did with Blackaby Ministries was spiritual leadership coaching. We slowed the process down a little bit, and we said, well, what if where you want to be in the future is so completely disconnected from where your creator wants you to be? I mean, do you want to get there faster? And I think the answer was maybe not. Maybe a better place to start is, where should I go? And what goals do you have for me? And get quiet in a more of a introspective listening type of coaching that we do throughout the process. So anyway, we've created this practice and we're delivering the coaching. We had coaches from all around the world come to get trained in us delivering this material. And at the end of the first break, all of a sudden, I looked and I had an email on my phone, and it was somebody asking me to do a Vistage talk. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And I remembered looking at that, and I said, wow, I think I might like to do some of that. And so I threw up a quick prayer, and I said, hey God, could you do that again? And immediately, Vered, I hear, could I? Which I always hear. If I ask the creator of the universe a question, he responds with his wry sense of humor. You're asking the creator of the universe if I can schedule a simple appointment? And I'm like, yes, of course you can. Would you? And then I went back and I did the next session. And an hour later, I had another email, and not one, but two new appointments came in. And I did the same thing. Only this time I said, would you? Would you? Would you? And by the end of that 3-day training course, I had been booked for 18 appointments coming up in the next year. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take that as a sign that maybe I should do a little bit more speaking. So that's how I got into it. And as I did it over the years that followed, the demand for the speaking started blowing up to the point that I ultimately stopped chairing. I had 3 Vistage groups that I chaired for about a decade. And 4 years ago, I felt compelled to let them go, because, as you know, the travel can get tiresome. And I was speaking 130 times a year somewhere around the world, and I was then flying home and doing 7 coaching one-to-ones a day, 3 days in a row, and getting back on the plane. And so my wife and I had a conversation about, something probably needs to give if we're going to live the balanced life. And ultimately, we decided to surrender the chairing. And so in January of 2020, I built my entire business around speaking at live events. Yeah, do the timing, right? Right before COVID, I say, let's build a whole business around live events. And that turned out to be a transformative experience as well, just as I moved into it. So anyway, you want some financial advice? Here's your key takeaway, everything. Call me, ask me what I'm doing, and then do the exact opposite, because every decision I have made based on this still small voice I've known my whole life that has never let me down, most of them usually aren't financially lucrative, but they are all 100% personally deeply fulfilling, and they seem to be impacting the world. So again, more evidence for me that I should listen to that voice, unless my goal is to be a billionaire by the end of it all.
So thank you for sharing, your journey. And I imagine that people listening have had their own ups and downs and, little miracles in their life where some part of them, whether they were conscious of it or not, asked for something. Maybe they asked from a place of looking at what they don't want, and a part of them became conscious of what they want instead, or maybe they actually paused to ask. And and something showed up, a little delightful surprise. And that's when we want to get curious. So I'm curious now, what guidance do you have, specific guidance do you have for individuals that want to realize and connect with their extraordinary why?
Well, first I would encourage everybody to kind of celebrate where they are, and the mere fact that they're even asking the question says that something bigger is happening. Because there are a lot of folks that go through life never asking those bigger, deeper questions, and maybe that's okay. But I also personally feel that the kind of the unexamined life and the one that doesn't ask some of those questions is maybe falling short of all that they were created to be. And so the mere fact, if people are wondering about purpose, I would say that that is evidence that there is a bigger force employing them and impelling them. That's the word I'm looking for, impelling them to search deeper. So celebrate that. I sense that there's more. I may have achieved this, that, and the other thing. I may be raising a family and have a beautiful family and great and healthy relationships with my significant other and my kids. That's delightful. And yet, even in the midst of all of that, I can sometimes say, is there more that I should be? And the mere fact that we're asking that question, I think, is evidence that maybe there is. So first of all, I would say there are lots of ways to get this thing right. And if we don't take the time out to just say, hey, where I am right now is where I'm supposed to be. And these questions that I'm asking right now are exactly the ones that are going to lead me the next step further on my journey. So acknowledge it, celebrate it would be step one, I think. Beyond that, then I think, again, just like there are three primary places you can get this thing called identity, from yourself, from others, or from your creator. I think there are a lot of ways we can look at this thing called purpose, and we can look at purpose by the things that we do, the physical things that we're able to accomplish that come out of this part of our being called our physical being or our body. I think that there's another piece of who we are called our mind, our intellect, and the thoughts that we can think and the things that we can conceive of in our heads. And we can ask our mind for our purpose. And what do you think that it is? I think we can get after this thing by pursuing those things that make us fulfilled or happy. And I love listening to Marshall talk about, what advice would your 95-year-old self say to you about the choices you made through life? And did they leave you happy at the end of the day? And so having experiences that fulfill us, obviously is going to be better than having experiences that left us wanting or didn't fulfill us. And then there is this fourth area, which is this spiritual conversation that we led with, that we could talk about. And I think that if you don't engage all four parts of your being, you could very easily miss it. Each of us have unique physical talents. Each of us have a creative mind that give us a unique set of thoughts. And each of us are somewhere on the emotional spectrum of we feel everything deeply to I haven't felt anything in decades, right? So using all those is good, but then it's also this other thing called the spirit. And my personal take on finding purpose is if you try to find it by just simply what you do, it's going to lead you astray. Because think about this, that 95-year-old self is probably at most maybe 3 or 4 or 10 years away from no longer being a physical being. That part of us is going to come to an end. Our physicality will end. Was it Bob Dylan that said nobody gets out of this thing alive, right? Mm-hmm. So the physical part ends. And the problem with trying to think your way to your purpose, it took me a long time to figure this out. The problem with thinking your way to the purpose is that if we go to our mind and our mind exclusively to find what we're here for, our mind is the seat of our ego. And the ego really wants two things, I think, from us. It wants me to be superior to everybody else and separate from them. Yeah. And I'm glad I have a mind. I'm glad I have an intellect. But the problem with purpose is your purpose has nothing to do with you. I mean, live for you and you alone. You will have lived, you will have died, and at best you won't have mattered because all you did was focus in on who you were and what you needed. And that's what the mind drives us to. It's about self-preservation. And if the mind's all about self and the purpose has nothing to do with self, then the mind alone, I don't think, can get you this thing called purpose, which by definition is other-centered. And sometimes we get access to the other-centered thing by the things that we feel, our emotions. But my emotions can also be impacted by my ego as well. And I have chased after many things that I thought would make me happy. And in the end, I got them and I wasn't fulfilled by that. So following my emotions blindly led me down some dark paths that I know wasn't, me being and living from my true self. So I think the best way to get after this thing called purpose is to quiet the mind first and to shut down the physicality of being and doing stuff and get yourself into a quiet place, because most of what we do day in, day out is all about our body and our mind. And we will engage those in the process. But secondarily, I think we have to first quiet those things, still our minds, still our thoughts, and get into a place where we are physically still. And I love the way you were talking about, for some, it might be out in nature, and that's great. Outdoors, walking along a coast or up in the mountains where the air is fresh and clear. I can really get much quieter there than I can in rush hour traffic or most anywhere else where there are a lot of demands on me. So if we quiet those things first, and then we ask our spirit, that spiritual part of our being, the voice of our conscience. It doesn't, and you're right, we all have a unique relationship with that voice. So whatever it is for us, as best we understand that voice, we get quiet and we start asking it big questions. Hey, who am I? Why am I here? What must be done? What are you up to that maybe you want me to join in on? Get creative with the kinds of questions that you ask your conscience or your spirit. And then eventually you will hear things. It may not be the first things that you hear. It usually isn't for me because my mind is very active. So the first things that I hear when I ask that question, I just notice them and I write them down. And I literally will say to my mind, I think I might have gotten this from Rick Carson. So I got to give him credit for this. I say to my mind, thank you for sharing. Maybe that wasn't Rick, but he's going to get credit today. And if I acknowledge the thoughts that are coming my way, the mind starts to get quiet. It feels heard, and so it gets silent. And then in that silence, I continue the practice of asking the big question. And eventually, I do hear from my conscience, and I know I've heard from it when I get emotional. I hear a voice, I hear something that either chokes me up or fires me up. And that emotion then is the evidence that my spirit has spoken and I have heard something. And when that happens, I dwell in that space a little bit longer. Why does that get me so choked up? And I've heard crazy things like, the single most important thing you need to be thinking of is your daughter's upcoming wedding and dancing with her at that event. And I'm like, okay, well, why does that event choke me up so much? And then more things start flowing my way. So allow my mind, inviting my intellect to process that which makes me emotional. And then eventually my mind does give me a gift, and it activates my physical body. And if I'm journaling, I start writing some things out, or I type on my computer. But that's a way of using all of who you are on this thing called, and if you ask it really big questions like, who am I and why am I here? You're going to start getting some insight about your purpose by engaging all of who you are, starting with your spirit, involving your emotions and that which makes you emotional, allowing that mighty intellect that we've all been gifted with to process those emotions, and then allowing it to activate our physical body. I think that, for me, has been the single most reliable way of engaging with this thing called purpose and meaning. And what's this whole thing called life all about? Long answer. I'm sorry. I'm a speaker. I can't say hello in 5 minutes, let alone hear you.
Well, you've given us a lot of nuggets there, and I appreciated that you brought up these 4 different domains, if you will, right? So we have the physical, we've got the emotional, we've got the mental, and we've got the spiritual. And I think that it really is the harmony of all of those. And I call that, as the Institute of Heart Math calls that, the state of coherence, right? That physiological state where we are not only at our optimal best and our body's running at its best, and we can access the best decisions, but we also have access to that guidance from that which is, as I said, bigger than this physical reality that we call this personal reality of ours. And we do need to ask for that. When we are coherent, whether we're in nature or we're feeling those emotions, whether it's about joyful moments in the past or in the future, or just moments where we felt connected to something bigger than ourselves. In that place, we've got a whole heart, a whole brain state. And from that, we can access some of those answers. We can receive some of those answers. I agree with you. You mentioned kind of the ego, and yeah, it is true that we all, right, for our survival, right, in this place of, we have a left hemisphere of our brain that is very much focused on our individuality and how I am different than you and you're different from me, and I am separate from my microphone, and I'm separate from the computer and from other things, and yet at the same time we have a right hemisphere that is connected to all that is. And what I heard and what you're describing is essentially the unity, the harmonization, the synchronization of all of those beautiful parts of us. And in that place, then we're able to access that which I believe is extraordinary. We are in a sense, a collection of many different parts of ourselves. And of course, our true self is that place where we, feel compassion and care and confidence and clarity, right? That is that higher place of all of us, the true place of all of us. But yet many of us are living a life where we feel very disconnected from that. Maybe we've had some hardships, as you've had in your life. We've experienced some very unexpected, in our perception, very unwanted changes. And it's really hard to think about, there being something bigger for us. So what can you say to those individuals right now that are maybe confused about their own why, or maybe even doubting that there is a bigger why for them?
All right. Wonderful question. And of course, as a speaker, I will answer it by beginning with the story, and probably ending with the story. The only thing of value I ever deliver are stories. Yeah? When I was in my late 30s, my family and I, we were with an oil company. We had a job that expatriated us. At first, for a while, we were in London, and then we moved into Hong Kong, and we were living in Hong Kong. And one day while we were in Hong Kong, we met an extraordinary woman. Her name was Jackie Pullinger. Jackie, as a 17-year-old British girl, came to a faith. And she was so excited by the faith that she had come into, and this relationship, this Christian relationship that she had entered into. She just couldn't sit still. She knew she had to do something with her life with this faith. And so she went to the vicar of her church and said, "What should I do?" And this man finally got tired of hearing her and just how enthusiastic she was about everything. And he finally said to her, "Jackie, I think you should buy a one-way boat ticket on the longest boat trip you can afford. And when you hear God say, get off the boat, you ought to get off the boat." She said it was very irresponsible of any pastor to tell a person, let alone a 17-year-old girl, to do that. But she said it was the only advice she had heard that made any sense at all. So she did that. And she bought a one-way ticket from, I think it was in Southampton in England, to Tokyo Bay. And when the boat finally pulled into the harbor in Hong Kong, Jackie heard God speak to her and say, "Jackie, get off the boat. This is where I want you to be." So I think she was then 18 years old. She got off the boat in Hong Kong. And there she spent the next 35 years of her life serving and ministering to the crack addicts and the prostitutes and the gangs in the walled city of Kowloon. She had given her life. She was a modern day Mother Teresa, just giving herself away the things that she had done there were just miraculous stories, and how they got accomplished, again, miraculous stories. While we were living in Hong Kong, Jackie came and paid a visit to the church we were attending. And I loved it. So somebody in our congregation said to her, Jackie, what are your quiet times like in the mornings when you get quiet and you ask God questions and you're devoting your day to Him? What's that look like? And in this delightful little British accent, Jackie says, well, first of all, darling, my quiet times don't happen in the morning. I'm usually out on the streets until 6 or 7 in the morning, and then I go to sleep, and it's usually 2, 3 in the afternoon before I even wake up. And when I do, I start going through my agenda for the day with God. I said, Lord, I need to do this. I need to do that. I never get very far into the agenda when God interrupts me. And He says something like, Jackie, have I told you how much I love you? And she blushes and demurs and then says, oh, thank you, Lord. That's very nice. Now about the day. How about this and that and the other? And He interrupts me again and says, Jackie, have I told you how beautiful you are? This happens 2 or 3 more times before eventually I finally get fed up. And I said, Lord, really, can we talk about the day? And I hear something like, if you feel it's important. And then we get on with the day. And I walked up to her after she spoke those words to us. And I said, Jackie, I want that kind of relationship with God. How did you develop it? And she said, well, what's your prayer time like? And I said, I get together with God and I say, thank you for this. I'm sorry for that. Please give me that. And I get on with the day. And she said, what if you slowed it down and you just asked a few more questions and then got silent after you asked questions? What would that look like? And so I tried that and it started working, and I started hearing some pretty remarkable things as I asked big questions and got really silent and I heard big answers. So first and foremost, I would say cultivate this quiet space where you can ask big questions and get really quiet. And then see if that voice doesn't prove itself to you in some significant, tangible way. And here's how that showed up for me. Dr. Gary Chapman is a famous author, and he wrote a wonderful book called The 5 Languages of Love. And he says we there are 5 big categories, right? There's words of affirmation, there's acts of service, there's physical touch, there's gifts, and then there's quality time. And we all speak one language as our primary because it's our language, and so we think other people are going to hear it. But if we're speaking a language that isn't theirs, they may not be feeling it, right? So I used to, my primary language is words. And if Jeannie comes up to me and tells me my wife, and she tells me how great she thinks I am, or what a wonderful job I'm doing with the kids, I feel it. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really good. If I offer words to her, she's immune. She doesn't get it at all because that's not her language. And I'm using words that used to frustrate me early in our relationship. And then I realized that if I got home early and or I wake up early in the morning and I empty the dishwasher, I come out and she's glowing. She's like, "Wow, he loves me. You know, he did this work for me." And I thought, okay, well, so Gary, there's something to this. So I've become fluent in speaking acts of service so that I can feel love with her. Now, to bring the 2 stories together, I was sitting in a meeting one day with 2 other guys, and we were talking about something. And one of them said something, I don't even remember what they said, but immediately I got chill bumps from head to toe. I was electrified with these chill bumps. So I got quiet and I asked God, what's that? He said, oh, Brett, that's me. I'm in what you just heard. And I quickened your feelings, your emotions, so you would feel it. Now, my secondary language, my primary and the first is words. And I know if I have 2-way conversations, I'm going to hear words from God. My secondary is physical touch. So for years, I would work and coach people in the spiritual leadership coaching practice, and they would say, Brett, you seem to hear from God very, very clearly. I don't. And so now I thank Dr. Gary Chapman, and I say, well, what's your love language? And one of them once said, well, it's acts of service. I said, well, what things are you trying to get done? And the CEO had a very long list of things he was trying to do. And I said, how about we just ask God if he won't speak to you by doing an act of service? He said, we could do that. I said, why don't we try? So he did. And the next morning he calls me up, Brett, you won't believe it. I had this to do on my to-do list for 2 years. I've been trying to get this one CEO to call me back. He'll never return my call. I can't get a hold of this guy. This morning, out of the blue, he called me. And I'm like, well, maybe that's God. So get fluent in your language. He is love. He is perfect love. And he speaks. I personally don't think he limits himself to 5. I think he has about 8 billion unique love languages. So I think part of this is just creating space where you can hear, and you can hear in the voice of love. What is the voice of love calling to you right now about who you are and what you're doing?
And to be able to hear that voice of love, we need to be in a place where we feel love. And that could be for ourselves. It could be love of nature, love of the other, whatever the other is. We need to be in a coherent state, experiencing some elevated emotion, being in a higher frequency. And for those people listening that might not resonate with the word God, if that's not aligned with their belief system, you can, of course, replace that with universal consciousness, the one mind, higher self, non-local intuition. Of course, there are many ways to call that. It could just be your soul, your higher being, that voice, as you said, that's in your heart. And I think that these stories are beautiful that you've shared, and I'm so grateful that you shared them with us, because what it does is open us to the possibility that if we find a place of quiet, if we find a place of compassion, or a place of feeling any elevated emotion or even ease, and we ask for that place from a just detached, curious mindset, not necessarily expecting anything to come back in the form of words or anything else, but just staying curious. When we ask, our job is to just stay curious and to notice what shows up for us. It may show up in the moment, or it may show up as a synchronistic event in our life, some little unexpected, delightful things. And sometimes it shows up as things that we may not consider to be delightful. And those two are exactly what we need in order to learn the thing that we need to learn that will bring us closer to our higher purpose. And it really is a mindset of curiosity and a faith, if you will, of believe in, things are working out for me. And I may not know how, and I may not know when, but I have that trust. Einstein said one of the most beautiful quotes that I love. And he said, the one most important decision that each of us gets to make is whether this universe is friendly or it's hostile. If I choose to believe that it's friendly, then even when unexpected things happen in my life that I may not welcome, that I don't want, right? Then it presupposes that those things came up for me for a reason. Maybe for me to become conscious of some shadow parts of myself, maybe for me to get some resources and learnings that will allow me to take even better care of myself. I mean, every emotion comes bearing gifts. And when I can be silent and love those parts of myself and appreciate, as you said at the beginning of our call, exactly where I am, then from that place, I have access to something that is bigger. I have access to something that I may be ready to hear. And as you said, just asking the questions is already an indication that we're ready to receive the answers.
It is. And I think we have a mutual hero in Dr. Viktor Frankl. And I speak about the impact he had on me in the TED Talk I gave, as I learned that as I was leading my business from the head and the hands, that I and the company I was leading had literally made all the same decisions that the companies that ultimately ended up running Auschwitz and the other Nazi death camps had made, because we failed to engage our spirit and our emotions when we were making business decisions. So that story's out there on the TED Talk, and that was a real wake-up call for me that, Brett, you have to quiet the mind sometimes, and you have to stop the doing, and you have to get after something bigger, or you and the company you lead could actually become complicit in evil. And what I love so much about Frankl's work is that in order to live a life of meaning and purpose, we have to be about creating one. Purpose is not going to find you. You're not going to trip over it along the way. You have to be intentional about standing for something and making your life matter. The second thing, we have to have a community that we belong to, a place where we can live out our purpose. If our purpose really is not about us and it's about other people, then we can't go to an island by ourselves and fulfill our purpose. If our purpose is about other people, we must be in community with them so that we can live it out when we do receive that which it is and be uniquely who we're meant to be. And then this third thing is exactly what you're talking about there, Vered, in this idea that no matter what's happening in your life, I mean, you'll have to be on this planet very long before hard times are going to come your way. Suffering is going to enter your world, and hopefully none of us will endure suffering like Frankel had to, but suffering will come in some way, shape, or form. And if those bad times, the rough times that we go through in life are simply something we endure, then they will have been meaningless. If instead we have a redemptive paradigm on the suffering that comes our way, and we say, you know what, this business partnership ended. I didn't think it was going to go this way, and it's horrible. And now I'm without a job. I'm without this. If it's just something we endure, then it had no meaning. If instead we can look at the bad stuff that's coming into our life, a failed business partnership, a failed relationship, an illness, the loss of a loved one, these hard things when they come along, if we can look at it for what it is, and say, God, creator, whoever you are, universe, please do not waste this difficult time in my life. Would you redeem this for me and make me better and transform me into a purer vessel of love for the rest of the world to see? Because of this, then we will have given those times meaning. And I think that's largely the path that we must follow. And we have to make sure that the voice that's speaking to us is indeed a reliable one. It may not be. So how do we cultivate that?
I believe that when we are in a coherent, elevated state, when we're experiencing love in our heart, we can always trust that voice. And I believe that the learning from these events, thank you for bringing up the example. I think that the meaning is received when we're able to accept all that is. Yes, to accept what has happened, to accept how we're feeling, to really be with all that is, because it's in that place of acceptance and curiosity that, that we're able to receive the gift. So I'll share a quick example, if it's all right, from this morning. One of my client calls. So she is CEO of actually multiple companies, and she's in the midst of something that's really exciting, building something that she's really excited about. And at the same time, she said, there's this other thing that's showed up, and it's such a contrast to the energy that I'm feeling on this side of my life. We've got these rental properties, and we're looking to kind of complete that, and then there's lawsuits and different things that are happening. And she's like, and all we did was good. Like, and these things are happening that we didn't expect. People are behaving in ways that are really out of integrity. And so we got into, well, how does that make you feel? So we went to an event that she opened an email, and she saw something, and she said, I feel hurt. I feel angry. I feel betrayal. I feel all of these emotions. And so we did a little bit of work. We went inward. Yes, we, in this case, did a little bit of tapping, just a little bit of work to accept these different parts. And she got the biggest gift that she could have received, which was this feeling of just calm and trust and love, and knowing, she literally said the song that came up for her was, that song, Ain't Nothing Gonna Break My Stride, right? Nothing's gonna slow me down. Literally, so for her, it came in the form of music. And so she got the resource, and now she's even more resilient, even more empowered. She got exactly what she needed to give, because as she was growing and fast tracking, there's a part of her that perhaps needed to slow her down, right? The shadow part. And until she was able to love all of the parts and accept, she wasn't able to receive the learning. So Brett, I think what's really beautiful about the messages that you're sharing with us today, from your own life and from, the experiences of the extraordinary people that you've brought up here today, is that we can all access that. We all can access that. And it starts from that place of first appreciating where we are, getting quiet, right? Shifting our energy to the right hemisphere of our brain, which is connected to all that is, which is right here, right now, kind of slowing down, all of the focus on the things and the people and all the external stuff, and just asking the questions, right? Asking whatever question is simple, and then just getting curious and delighting when things show up and thinking when things show up.
Yeah, I love this, and you threw a great phrase in there too, and that's the emphasizing the importance of doing the shadow work and looking at the dark parts of who we are, and how maybe there were times in our life where we weren't being our best self, and not ignoring it, but acknowledging it and saying, welcome to the human race. Yeah, you were not perfect then, you're not perfect now. And can you be complete with all of who you have been up to this moment, so that you can get yourself into a clearing in this present, and from that clearing see much more clearly that which we're called to do. I think oftentimes regret shows up, and if we choose to ignore it, we don't learn from it. We haven't redeemed it. But if we confront it face on, we take that to our creator and say, what do you do with that? That's not who I wanted to be, and that's who I was. And then listen for the voice of love coming back. I think I personally have always been amazed by what I hear back. It's never a condemning voice. It's never a condemning voice. Sometimes it can be convicting, Brett, you shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, I know. And that's the difference. If I agree with the voice that convicted me from something back then change can take place. If I disagree with it and I resist it, or if it's a voice that's condemning me at the level of my identity, you're worthless. That's not the voice of our creator. Right. We are worthy. We were created in the image of our creator, and therefore to embrace that gift that was given to us is to acknowledge that we're not perfect. And from that, we get the power to actually then hear very clearly from this creator that loves us too much to leave us like we are, and wants to partner with us on this journey called life, and fulfilling and living a life of unique significance.
That's right. That's right. We are deeply loved, and sometimes we need just to pause and connect with our soul, with our deeper knowing. And so, Brett, I'm so deeply grateful for all of the wisdom, the bright light that you have brought into our worlds today. I think we all needed to. We can all use a little reminder of who we really are and our true empowerment. And how can people learn a little bit more about you, your speaking, all the wonderful things that you're doing?
Thanks for asking. They can go to brettpyle.com. That's my website, brettpyle.com. The TED Talk, if they just Google that, they'd get to the TED Talk and some other resources there.
Beautiful. Once again, thank you. Thank you for giving from your heart, trusting, following your extraordinary why, and giving from your heart today. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Joy to be with you.